Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. We can just wait for a couple of minutes before joining. In the meantime, let me introduce you to Jane from UserList and Benedict from UserList. So Jane and Benedict are co-founders of UserList, which is essentially an email sort of. I would like to call it a lifecycle email tool for SaaS companies. It's not just an email marketing tool. It does a lot more than your average email marketing tool, and is specifically designed keeping in mind the needs of SaaS companies. And today we're going to talk about the importance of company data. So essentially, every SaaS company has like pretty much all SaaS companies have like an account and then users under that account. And a lot of SaaS companies allow a user to be part of multiple accounts or organizations or workspaces. And we want to talk about the importance of gathering data at the company level so that you can use company data in your lifecycle emails and in-app messages, so that a user receives messages based on the action that they're performing inside a particular account or a workspace or an organization. And that obviously improves the customer experience, which is frankly like lacking from a large number of SaaS companies with the kind of outreach they do. Is like they don't really keep in mind the fact that a user could be performing a certain event in account A or organization A, and then going and doing something in a different account, whereas the user is the same, but like those different events pertain to different accounts. So combining them doesn't make any sense. And thankfully, UserList is trying to solve this problem. So excited to talk about it. Do you want to introduce yourselves, Jane and Benedict?
Yeah, thanks so much, Arpit, for the warm introduction there. We're really glad that you and the Data Led Academy are bringing up this point of customer data as a topic in general, because it's such an abandoned topic for many SaaS companies out there. What they like, of course, we all care about sales and marketing, but such things as customer data, unfortunately, while being crucial, is often overlooked. So we're there to help you out there. And Benedict is going to be talking today about the data model that relates to company accounts. So hope like with the three of us on board, we can cover different aspects of it pretty well. So let me fire the slides and just give you an overlook of the topic, and we'll take it from there. How does that sound?
Yeah, great. Sounds perfect.
Awesome. So one of the problems is that most email tools today still deal with individual users. So we pretend that a SaaS company is serving individual customers so that everybody can email, can talk about a list of human beings, while in fact this is not true. The majority of SaaS products out there serve accounts, team accounts, company accounts. And it's amazing how tools out there pretend that this is not a problem. And more than that, these accounts can have different relationships to users. One to many, many to many. We're going to talk about this today. The problems are massive. The data is duplicated. So you have certain data that should be stored on the company level. Instead, you, as a founder, as a marketer, have to duplicate the same data and update multiple profiles at once, trying to achieve some sort of good sync between different people in the same account. And that never works well if this data model does not represent the real life situation. You cannot model complex relationships with such version. And Arpit has been talking about, for example, workarounds when you would create different user identifiers in email tools for different companies, but that's not ideal because it's an artificial solution. And you can't really implement smart onboarding, which we are advocates for. So you end up sending the same onboarding sequence to the same person multiple times. Remember Slack? How you join Slack every time and you get a little bot that tells you the same exact thing for the 10th time, and you're like, I know how to use Slack. And we try to avoid that. So the solution to that is bringing the company data model into your data into the messaging tool you use. And we added that just last month to user list. We've been working in this for the last half a year, something behind the scenes in the closed beta. This is a pretty, it looks pretty elegant on the outside. Instead of just having a user list, you also get a company list. And then you can see that companies have their own segments, and you can observe the users inside the company. It looks pretty simple on the outside as a UI, but in fact, there's been giant work that Benedict has done behind the scenes to make this possible, and so that you'll be able to send this data in the proper way to our API. And when we launched this was perceived with massive positive feedback. Here's one of our users who said that this is a switching, life-changing moment for them. They've been waiting for ages for somebody to do this. And to this moment, we're really proud of our solution. We'll try to promote ourselves less and focus on the useful bits. However, we still think that our implementation is one of the best because we do handle the intricacies of different data models really well. And now passing the word over to Benedict, I'll be still advancing the slides for him so we can present together. So the little human clicker here. Benedict, your word?
Yeah, thanks. So Jane already mentioned that there are multiple scenarios that can play out in your SaaS application. Maybe if we go to the first slide, and I can just talk about the main things we are talking about. So in a traditional setup, you're tracking stuff on the user level, as you can see on the right. Basically, you track individual user profiles, like their name, their email address, stuff like that. What we added to user list, and what other tools also support to some degree, is that you also start tracking account level data, like company data. The name of the company they're working at, the plan the company is subscribed to, how they're using features, like how many things they have in their account and stuff like that. And then we also added relationship data that basically connects users to companies and describes like what's the relationship of this user to a particular company. And basically this allows us to model three main scenarios. Can we go to the next slide? So, we have the examples. Sorry, I forgot about us. So to give you more examples, I think I already mentioned that user level stuff is first name, last name. Relationship level stuff is account role. You can probably track like this user as an admin of this particular company, or this is the billing contact for this company. And then on the company level, you usually track the stuff that's specific to that account and to how they use this account. So now finally to get to the examples, first use case we have is basically the one that almost every tool out there supports. Can we get to this next slide, please?
Yep.
It's basically the one-to-one example. And in this particular case, you don't usually need anything special because a user represents a company and their relationship is one-to-one. They're an admin. Fine. Like nothing to worry about. Unfortunately, this is like I'd say like the least common use case for SaaS applications because usually you share access with the team. So that brings us to the next example. That's one-to-many. Basically, where you have a company that has many users and they have different roles within that company. For example, you have an admin, the editor, the billing contact, a guest, stuff like that. And this is where it gets interesting because then you have to differentiate between users and what they do inside those companies. In theory, you can also flip this model around, like basically many to one in a way, where a user might belong to many companies, but a company might only belong to one user. For example, if you have like an app that organizes stuff, you could use like the company or the account level for like different projects and like track stuff based on that project and connect it only to one user. But at some point, like usually by customer requests, you usually end up with a many-to-many example where a user can belong to many companies, a company has many users, and the user's role within a company might differ from company to company. So you might be an admin or an account owner for one company, but a guest on another account and stuff like that. And just imagine you invite a freelancer who's working with multiple companies using the same tool. They'd either have to create different user accounts or just like be connected to multiple. So those are the three data models you can use, and usually your application already like in the background in the database models one of these. In the most complex use cases, usually something like many-to-many. And what UserList does is it basically allows you to model all of those like cases and scenarios within UserList itself, and then use automations and segmentation and stuff like that to work with that data. So
the raving words from our customers.
Yeah, raving words from our customers. When we set out to build this, we of course looked at like the landscape of other tools and how do they implement this? Is there anything we can learn? And sadly, we noticed that most tools just ignore the fact that companies are even a thing. So you end up with like weird setups where you track everything on a user level and then have to sync it between all the users on that account, but it only works for like the one-to-many situations. And really quickly breaks down when you get to too many stuff. So we try to fix that. What we also allow you to do is track events. So you can like track on a user, both on a user level and on an account level. You can track events. So for example, a user logs in or a user performs a specific task inside your application. They sign up. They reset their password, whatever. But you can also have events that are on a company level. For example, a payment failed for the company's credit card. That's not connected to user. That's just something that happens within that company, but still an event. And we allow you to do like both of those situations, as well as stuff like a particular company performed a task within a certain company. Did I say that right? A particular user performs an event in a particular, So you basically can connect both user and company within an event that describes a certain action that user took within the context of that company. And we allow you to basically send all of those into UserList. As a quick recap, what's the difference between events and properties? Properties basically model the current state of things. So like, if you look at the things, how they are right now, you look at properties and it's like, this is the name of the user. They have like uploaded 5 photos. They, for example, are currently in a trial state and stuff like that. So that models the current state of things, and events allow you to basically look at the history and how things evolved over time, because every event is basically a unique point in time that describes a action that happened, and you can look back at the things a user did within a company in the last week or so.
I would like to briefly talk about this part, because it's really interesting, because a very common event that applies to every SaaS company is basically an account being canceled when a user decides to cancel their account. And typically any one user, an admin, will go and do this, will perform this event of canceling the account or the subscription. But essentially that event actually applies to the company. It's not an event that's just tied to the user. And in the past, it's been really challenging to basically, tie that event to the user and the company at the same time. So the fact that you can sort of connect one event to a user as well as a company is really important, to understand what's happening at the company level. Because a lot of events are performed by users, but they're not like specific to a particular user.
Yeah, that's true. And also what we found interesting is that like the concept of an event is always usually associated with a person doing something, but there's a couple of things where the thing just happens without any human interacting with something. Like, as I said, like the credit card fails, or I don't know, like their account gets blocked because I don't know, they triggered
errors. I think errors is a great example. A lot of tools, like let's say you have a workflow automation tool. I mean, I can talk from my experience where, an error takes place. So that error is actually happening in your account and not something that a user is making happen. A user is not actually doing something for that error to happen, but the error is taking place. And that is basically an account event, an event tied to your account or organization or workspace.
Yeah, exactly. And this setup allows you to model those, basically. So if you want to like integrate this stuff into your application, there are a couple of customer data platforms out there that basically allow you to get started quickly. Like the most prominent ones, for example, are like Segment or RudderStack. What's good about those platforms is that you integrate them once and then basically connect them to all your tools. And what's also nice is that they at least have a concept of groups, and those groups also allow you to model like one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many relationships. Yeah. So you can get started pretty quickly with a setup like this. And if your email marketing tool supports those use cases, they basically work out of the box with those tools, especially with regards to company data. What we layered on top of Segment and RudderStack is that we also allow you to use their integrations to send relationship properties. So that's something their data model or their data schema doesn't support out of the box, but with a little bit of like glue code on top of that, you can get like a user's role within a company inside user list with very little effort. And with that, I'd like to give the word back to Jane for some more like concrete examples on how to use this.
Thank you, Benedict, for the great overview of what the data looks like. And now I'll just bring up some real life situations, lessons, basically ideas that you can start using even if you're not using a company data model, which is particularly valuable. Just to start thinking on the company level inside your head, that's like step one. So idea number one is to segment companies, not users, based on the company activities. We already talked about that. This is very helpful. And when you're tracking information on the company level, you can understand a complete picture of what's happening inside the account. If you had 5 users, one of them is the admin who is handling the billing. They never did anything inside the app. You might get an impression that's like they need a reactivation campaign ASAP, but that's not the fact, because there are 2 other team members who are doing something else in the account and everything is live and healthy. So company segments kind of overcome that, and you can segment companies based on the properties, the stats, the success metrics as an aggregate of their users. You can do that by either storing some of these metrics on the company level, or if your tool allows that, by having like aggregate data from different users. Well, the most reliable way is definitely using that, like using specific company specific properties for that, but you can find different ways of doing that. If that's a super important metric, you can even do that inside your own application behind the scenes, start like calculating some company specific metrics already, and then propagate them to different accounts. Then another thing you should be doing is to trigger campaigns based on company events, not user events. And Arpit just mentioned a great example of account being canceled as a classic, super important event. I will just show you a screenshot of what this trigger area looks like in user list. Basically, when company joins a segment, you can then decide whether all of the users deserve to receive something based on that, or you can filter people based on their, for example, role in the company. Let's say if the payment fails, you'll only be sending the dunning campaign to the admins of this account. Or it's not that all guests and all editors and all content managers always need to receive notifications. And I imagine many of our listeners are using different ad platforms, and the amount of granularity that, like, by default everyone's getting notifications about everything. And if you're not Facebook, and Facebook allows you, to come into the app and customize every single item, if you don't allow that, then sending everything about everything to everybody is like a very bad idea. So if you can avoid that, please do. Then another thing to do is to create different onboarding flows for each role. And you can absolutely do that even if you just store, even if you don't have the concept of companies, just send a role property about each user and create different onboarding campaigns, or maybe customize specific emails inside a single campaign, depending on what you want to send to them. But an admin would likely need to receive more than a typical guest or manager or something. Or if there is somebody who can edit content, they might receive, for example, some content tips or some creative advice, while the admin might just be left alone or receive some very specific admin stuff.
Yeah.
And another important thing, we highly recommend, do not make assumptions about roles. We've talked to many founders of many companies, and sometimes they're so positive that somebody who signs up, who calls the card, that is absolutely 100% the editor of something. And it can be so not true. And different companies are doing things in different ways. And if you are dealing with teams and you're watching what they do, you will know that sometimes it's the founder who holds the card, or sometimes it will be a standalone, I don't know, accountant or somebody else who handles the billing. They only need to put in the card, that's it, they're done, and nothing else. And even within one product, different teams will hold different roles. So do not pretend that you can predict all of them, and instead try and if you allow team management inside your product, just have explicit drop-down fields for different user types. That will free you up of different dangerous assumptions and will help you to sort through different roles well. Another tip is to minimize onboarding for people who are joining their second company, their third company, and have already been using the app for a while. Yeah. And there are, again, different ways you can be tracking that. You can have a little index property on individual user, which will show how many companies that have joined over time or something like that, or they currently belong to. Or you can use the baked-in property of your automation tool, which will do this on our own. For example, in user list, all campaigns are by default educational and won't be sent more than once. So this way, the same onboarding campaign just won't fire the same time for the second user, even if they are supposed to be getting one. There are different angles you can look at that, but just think about what can be minimized, because ultimately sending less is very often better than sending more, because by just flooding the inbox, you will not achieve great results in any case.
Yeah, I would like to quickly talk a little bit about the roles. If you can go back to the previous slide.
Yeah,
there's a very, very important use case that's worth mentioning, I think, which I've seen at multiple companies that I work with, where the buyer often, or the admin of the tool could be, well, the client, but then the person who's actually implementing it is an agency. So a lot of agencies, especially for products, for B2B SaaS products that basically sell to agencies, it just makes sense to think about roles, because I've actually had this request coming in the past, where when I used to head growth at Integromat, where a lot of agencies would manage accounts on behalf of their clients, and basically they did not want the account owner, or the admin in this case, to receive a lot of those onboarding emails, or even error messages, and basically day-to-day lifecycle emails, because they're we don't want the account owner or the admin to receive any email. We just get them to sign up for the product, put in their credit card, like Jane mentioned, and then we manage the account end to end. So, and at the time we did not have that feature and we had to implement it. So it's really important to think about roles, because a lot of times like almost every time for every campaign, you should think about the roles that will be receiving those emails, because there'll always be a role that you want to exclude. You might want to include the admin in a lot of emails, but it depends on who your buyer is. Often the buyer is not the same as the user, and the buyer doesn't want to receive those emails. So you should obviously think about allowing users to like within your app, allowing them to choose their email preferences, whether they want to receive certain emails or not. But at the same time, you should be mindful about that when creating your campaigns. It can actually make a lot of difference, especially when you're selling to like agencies and consultants and stuff.
Absolutely. And from the UX perspective, it's tempting to have like a grid of different permissions. Sometimes you can see that inside the app. I would really advise against that, because when the user is at the point of interacting with this grid, they might not be as aware about the product as you are at this point. So it will be just hugely confusing for them. Instead, try and think of common use cases, such as like a consultant access. That's wonderful. Billing admin access, or like editor, something like that. And just do the work of defining that grid preferences for them instead of trying to provide them granular access. That's not always a great idea.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Great.
And we're mostly through the key advice here. And again, some top tips on getting started is not try to do everything from day one in the most perfect way, because it is not possible. What we recommend is to pick a tool. Ideally, of course, it should support the company accounts, but in any case, you need a tool. You need to implement a simple tracking plan, start with a few key properties and events. And Arpit, of course, can tell us more how that usually happens in real life, and how somebody will try and like develop a tracking plan of 3 pages of text, and then bring it to their developer. Everybody will get overwhelmed. It never gets used in campaigns. So start with the few ones you really need, set up a few campaigns, and then as you interact with that yourself and as your customers interact with that, then you can iterate from there. And you can, like in a few months from now, you can schedule iteration number 2, revise, update, and go onwards from there. So that's probably the best way to go for it. That's all for us. If you want to try Uselist, we have a little discount here. You can get 30% off your first 3 months. Of course, we need to make our little sales pitch, but basically, if we could give just one piece of advice, keep it simple. Keep it simple again.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when it comes to getting started with any tool like Userlist, it's really important to think about the tracking plan and the events that you want to send to that tool. You don't want to send too many events, which is definitely a disaster, because you won't end up using most of them, and having more events, which is going to create more complications. So, keeping the number of events low, but really thinking about the properties you want to send along with every event, because a lot of times, you might end up sending an event, but you don't send relevant properties. And basically, if you don't do that, you cannot really filter based on those properties. So yeah, like I definitely am a huge proponent of creating a tracking plan even before you pick a tool. So I mean, irrespective of the tool, your tracking plan should kind of be like the sort of source of truth that tells you which events are being sent to which tools. You could actually have one consolidated tracking plan, and then which it basically defines the destination you're sending the data to. So if you're using a product analytics tool, you definitely need a tracking plan, and then you can use the same tracking plan to decide which of those events you want to send to like Userlist or any other onboarding tool which relies on event-based engagement. So yeah.
I'm curious, what from your practice, what's the best way to get company up to speed that has not been has never had a tracking plan before and don't know how to even think about it? Like, what are the best resources?
Well, I'm going to obviously talk about the resources that I have at Data Led Academy, which essentially is a place for people to learn how to work with data, mainly product and growth professionals to learn how to work with data and then get all their answers, expert, actionable answers to their questions about data. So we actually have a very intensive tracking plan template, which is created after a lot of research. It's a simple Google sheet, but it's a great place to start. So anyone can use that template and get started. We also have detailed guides, which are obviously free. Everything is free, by the way. So there's a complete step-by-step guide that walks you through the process of creating your tracking plan. We have guides dedicated to helping you decide what events you should track, whether you should think about your events being server side or client side, thinking about the properties you want to send with each event, thinking about the data types for each property. It's really important to think about the data types for each property, because if you don't specify a data type, you basically will end up with bad data. You'll have data, but you would not really know how to make sense of it. So there's a lot of resources out there on Data Led Academy, and I'm happy to share specific resources and answer people's questions.
Yeah, we didn't quite announce, but if anyone has questions, there should be questions tab somewhere on the right. Please drop your questions there. Meanwhile, we'll just keep chatting with Arpit, and we'll be looking forward to your questions.
Yeah, I think we should talk about a couple of products, like really popular products like Notion, Slack, etc., to provide more context on how these companies today handle company properties, and like that can probably give more context to people who are basically thinking how to implement this at their own company.
Mm-hmm. Have you been collecting such information for Data Led Academy?
Yeah, so I do have a bunch of research, and basically I've come across a couple of distinct ways companies are doing this. So obviously the common one is that a user signs up for an account, and then the same user can create a new account or a workspace or an organization. At Integromat, we had the same process. Like you could sign up for an account, and your billing is tied to your account. Obviously, you could have multiple users in your account, but then you can always create a new account, which will have a separate billing, or you could join someone else's account. So if you invite me to your account, I can join your account using the same email address. So basically, I have one user ID, but I'm part of multiple accounts. I'm either an admin or I'm not an admin. I have some other role. But then there are companies like Slack, and Slack has a very unique approach because what Slack does is every time you join a Slack workspace, Slack creates a new account for you. So and that's why what you mentioned initially, like it treats you like a new user, which is really frustrating for users. But I realized that it does solve this problem, because as a user, I can decide if I want to receive emails pertaining to a specific workspace I'm in. So I might want to receive emails about 2 different workspaces I'm in, and not receive anything about the rest of the workspaces I'm in. I can do that. I can even have different credentials, so I can actually sign up for multiple workspaces with the same email, but my credentials are different. So essentially, Slack treats each user as a distinct user, irrespective of how many workspaces they're in. So if I'm in 5 workspaces, I'm like 5 distinct users, and this approach works well for a company like Slack, but it obviously has a lot of other challenges, like Jane mentioned, like every user is treated as a new user, which is not a great user experience. But in some ways, it is better than how other companies do it, where they basically they don't even, they sort of like if you use a tool like Intercom, and Intercom has their own version of companies and stuff, but it's still very hard to understand what basically create campaigns based on what a user is doing inside a particular account, because typically the user is still a user unless you create distinct user profiles. So it's something that we've done in the past, where as a workaround, we've created distinct user profiles by combining the user ID and the company ID. So if you're part of 5 workspaces, you have 5 different profiles on the email system. and then we can, sort of send you emails based on what you're doing in a particular organization. But that also doesn't solve the problem of, the same user being onboarded multiple times. So every time you join a new workspace or you create a new workspace, you're treated as a new user, which is bad. And there's no way to kind of solve that. So it's a pretty hard problem to solve. And the fact that UserList has managed to do it is pretty incredible.
I'd love to ask you more questions about what other tools can do that, because what we know about is Intercom and with the imperfections that you mentioned. So basically, you can browse between, see that the person is part of other companies, see what people are inside the company, but that's it. The activity feed is still mixed up, and that doesn't make much sense to try and parse that. How about other tools? Have you been watching this, companies trend pop up?
Yeah, so I have used Customer IO extensively in the past, and this is a problem that they're aware of, but even they haven't been able to solve it. On Customer IO, their workaround is to basically create a separate workspace for users and a separate workspace for companies. And in reality, it just doesn't work because it's basically you can't really combine user properties with company properties. So you can do certain campaigns which are solely based on company properties. So if you want to send an email campaign to users in a company that's on a free plan, you can do that. But it's still not efficient because essentially they're two separate workspaces, two separate accounts. You can't really tie the data. So yeah, basically with Customer IO, we found this workaround of creating distinct user profiles, wherein the same user would often receive like 2 or 3 emails regarding the same campaign if multiple profiles of the same user fell into a segment. So if you're in 3 different workspaces and you've basically performed the same event in those workspaces, or you fall under the same segment. Like if you have three workspaces where you are an accountant, whatever, depending on whatever your role is, and all of those 3 workspaces, meet a certain criteria, you receive 3 emails. Although each of those emails is pertaining to a specific workspace or organization, you'd still receive 3 different emails. And as a user, you'd probably be confused. You'd probably think it's a mistake. Although it's not exactly a mistake. So yeah, it's pretty challenging, and I frankly haven't seen any company solve this. So I'm pretty excited.
I'd like to point out, for example, there is a tool. Well, this is more about analytics now, though. Sherlock, the scoring engagement scoring tool, they operate entirely off segment, and they only care about companies and accounts, basically, because they understand, they deal with enterprise customers, and they know that the account level health matters, not the individual users. So they're doing it right, except for they're not doing much on their own with the messaging. They're just parsing the data, calculating the score, and then passing it back to the data platform. But I think they're at least setting a good rule of dealing with companies there.
Yeah, and I recently saw they did launch some messaging feature as well.
Did they?
Yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah, Sherlock has they've created some messaging features. I haven't really explored it in detail, but like you said, they understand the problem. They recently got acquired, and they're probably they're operating in a very unique space because they've managed to sort of understand this problem before a lot of other companies have, and now a lot of companies are obviously trying to solve this problem. But Sherlock is doing a pretty good job. But still, it's not really it's not exactly an engagement tool, right? So their messaging feature is still an add-on, so to say. It's not their core feature. Worth mentioning here is mixed panel messaging, which sort of in some ways can solve this problem, but it's shutting down.
It's shutting down, yeah.
Yeah, it's shutting down. It's no longer available to new users, and for existing users, it's available for about 2 years. I know a lot of existing users of mixed panel messaging are really pissed off about it, but mixed panel understands that it's not their expertise, and it's still hard to solve because their group properties feature is any was sold as an add-on feature. It's not available to all users. So you have to firstly be on an enterprise plan to get access to that feature and then use it. And it's pretty complicated.
It's not uncommon for we've seen things come up and shut down. For example, last year Barometrics launched their lifecycle messages, which didn't last too long to our surprise, even though they had great starting point. They already had customer payment data, which is a great starting point for the data itself. But it just shows that messaging itself is very complex, and it's hard to focus on it as a core. If it's not your core feature, it's hard to bring it to the good feature parity.
Yeah, and it's also hard for teams. I mean, I just cannot imagine. I can imagine because I've seen it happen. I've seen how complicated it gets where in one company, 5 different messaging tools are being used. So a customer will receive an onboarding email from tool A, and then when they cancel their account, they receive another email from tool B. And one of the big challenges here, which I've seen the really large companies ignore, is the fact that for the customer, you're still one company. The customer doesn't care about the fact that you're using different tools. And if a customer wants to unsubscribe from your emails, if you either give them a choice to unsubscribe from certain types of emails. So if you have like a really robust subscription center where a customer can choose which emails you want to unsubscribe from. But even with companies that have that, I've seen them mess this up where you unsubscribe, but you still receive emails because you're using different tools and they're not tightly integrated. So if I unsubscribe and that email came from tool A, inside tool A I'm marked as an unsubscribed user, but inside tool B or tool C I'm still a subscribed user, and that creates a lot of challenges. If you use multiple messaging tools, it's a real challenge, and there isn't one messaging tool, one email tool that can solve all the use cases of any growing company, because you have email marketing, you want to do newsletters, you want to do sales people want their own email tool, and then of course you have product emails. In some cases, customer success teams have their own customer success tools with inbuilt email features. So it's just a bad practice to have like so many different email tools. So it's really important early on, if you're an early stage company, it's really important to think about your messaging, your data model, and the tools that you're going to use and the use cases that tool is going to solve. I think UserList has come pretty close to solving a bunch of those challenges. Tools like Customer IO understand this, and they're trying to solve challenges that standard email marketing tools solve. So they're like trying to get into the territory of tools like Marketo, etc., which are solely focused on marketing or demand gen use cases.
Yeah, we have the benefit here because we've only been out for like 3.5 years, which means that we are relatively early to be able to make these changes in our data model. And Benedict has had the company feature in the works for I don't know, for a while, right? I mean,
it's been at least
the groundwork
for like basically since day one.
Yes, and unless you plan for it, like we talked to Derek Reimer of Drip, and they, as founders, would love to see that feature built for them by them, but it was at their stage of growth, just impossible to change the fundamentals of their own like platform data model. So unless it's done early, it's really hard to add it as an add-on for the tools.
I mean, that's the only reason. That's the only reason more established companies are not doing it, because they know it's needed, but they just know that the investment is just too huge, and they're not willing to make that investment.
Yeah, Benedict, as you've been, sort of chaperoning multiple SaaS companies as they onboarded and brought in the company data, what are the common challenges or like points of friction have you seen?
I think one of the points of friction was basically when they started out, like we didn't know about all the use cases that people would want to solve with this. So we had to basically learn as we go and like add support for more sophisticated triggers or more sophisticated segmentation. And I think we're still not fully done with the list of possibilities of what you can do with this. But like, we're always eager to learn, like with every new customer that tries to use this and maybe runs into a barrier and it's like, I can't quite figure out how to do this with user lists. It's always a nice opportunity to learn something more about this data model and about this use case, and then how to better solve it than we do right now.
For example, one of the features that's in the works but still not available yet is being able to calculate how many companies the user belongs to, so we can kind of query the data this way. So we'd love to make that available soon as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because you could, design campaigns based on that. Like if you want to like identify power users and you want to like beta test a new feature, you can easily like create a segment of users that are like 2 or 3 accounts, and then get them to sort of give you feedback. So that's like having those little improvements can actually go a long way for SaaS companies.
I think the time is up. We should probably be wrapping up today. Benedict, Arpit, thanks so much for joining. It doesn't look like we have any questions today, but we had a great chat. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, I think we had a great chat as well. And this is a really, really important topic. So, we should keep the conversation going. And if people have questions, they should send in their questions either through like, we'll publish this video on YouTube. So you can like, leave your comments there, or you can like reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or Twitter. Or you can check out Data-Led Academy, that's dataled.academy, and go through the resources. And again, if you have questions, you can just reach out to me.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good day.
Bye.